All right, and we are live. Welcome, everybody. Brad, thanks so much for coming to the show. Grateful to have you.
Oh, thank you so much, Mike. Let's hit it hard, man. We're ready. We got some important topics to discuss.
There's a lot of different things I want to dive in with you because you go all over the map with peak performance from walking, running, from the nutritional side, specifically with your podcast, the B-Rad podcast. You really dive into pretty much everything, it seems.
Well, I've been accused of that, definitely being all over the map. That's what my teachers used to tell me when they're trying to get me to focus. But especially with fitness, I've come full circle, and it's been an amazing life journey here because in my youth, I was an extreme endurance athlete. I was a distance runner. I tried to be one in college, and I kept getting sick and injured. So I went to the sport of triathlon, and that led to a beautiful odyssey where I got to realize my dream of life of being a pro athlete, and I competed on the pro circuit for 9 years, traveled all over the world. At my very best, I was U.S. national champion twice and ranked number 3 in the world. But that was a young man's game, and that was a long time ago. And so, when I retired at the tender age of 30, I was like, okay, now my life's in front of me. What am I going to do with my fitness ambitions and my competitive intensity? And I realized, and you'll see this, on the homepage of my website, I'm saying pursue peak performance with passion throughout life. Because I think, everybody has their heyday, and we can tell stories when we're watching football on TV, and your buddy says, "Yeah, I had quite an arm, and I was supposed to play
Mhm.
in college ball, but I messed up my shoulder." Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then everybody watches TV the
That one
rest of their
injury, and then I
life.
would have went everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like you have to find something that keeps that competitive edge going throughout life to really live the most rich and meaningful life. And it doesn't have to be organized competition, but I found my way into different athletic goals, and they've evolved tremendously over time. Notably, for one period of life, my main competitive athletic goal was to dominate little kids in soccer, basketball, and track and field. And I coached my son from age 5 until 15, and I was the MVP of that soccer team and that basketball team every year. And I would pound on these poor little kids, and I'd play my hardest, and I'd score another goal, and then I'd get a hat trick, and we'd
Mhm.
resume the scrimmage. And another dad taught me that who was older. He had kids that were way older than mine, and I
Mhm.
saw him beating up on his kids on a pickup basketball court one time, and I'm like, Dennis, your kid's almost crying. He's only 10 years old. Why do you keep sticking it to him? And he's like, he looks me in the eye and he goes, you got to play hard and you got to show them what it's like to give it your best and be competitive. And that's what they learn. And if you go soft on them and say, great shot, you beat me again, that's what they're going to learn is that you're full of crap anyway. And so
Yeah.
I took that message to heart. And of course, I wasn't a jerk about it. I always had fun, but I really did train to keep in shape, to be able to do the cuts and the darting around so that I could score goals on 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds in
Mhm.
soccer and, go crazy on the basketball court. And then something happened about the age of sophomore year. My son's becoming quite a little basketball player at the high school, and they'd have these Sunday night pickup games, and it would be 3-on-3, and you'd rotate to the winner court, the loser court, and all this stuff. And it was great because like the varsity guys were there, and then him and his JV buddies that I'd been dominating for so long. And I played hard. I'd have my hands on my knees. It was great. You're sweaty. And then one night I'm driving home, and he goes, "Dad, you don't have to drive me to Sunday night pickup anymore. I can get a ride from Josh's dad." And I'm like, "Oh no, I love driving. I love playing. It's great." He goes, "Dad, you don't have to play in the 3-on-3 pickup Sunday night anymore." And I went from MVP on the eighth grade team to 10th grade. I was a liability on the court. And so
Yep.
my team would end up on the losing court because I couldn't guard these varsity guys. So that's when I stepped to, new athletic goals that were more unique and particular. And today
Mhm.
I'm obsessed with masters track and field. So I'm now a sprinter and a high jumper instead of an extreme endurance athlete doing that crazy triathlon and Ironman stuff.
Yeah. It's funny because then when your kids finally do beat you when you've been going hard on them, they know they earned it.
Oh, and so my son would always demand that we play one on one, starting at age, 7 or 8. And we made this rule that I couldn't use my height to my advantage. So, like, I can't just post up and make a layup,
Mhm.
but otherwise we're playing hard and I'm driving to the basket. But that was the rule. And I beat him every single time. And then about 13 or 14, he took it to me And, it was a close game. It was 30 to 27 or whatever. And he never once asked again to play one-on-one. We played and played and played for years. He beat me once and he retired and or retired me from the thing. And I probably would have never beaten him again either.
Yeah. So let's dive into endurance. I'm fascinated by endurance work, kind of coming from a strength background myself, in the world of kettlebell work and kind of the skill of strength. The work that you've done in endurance from athletics, as well as the work you've done with Paluva and now your new book, which is Born to Walk. When this is out, this will be available for order in here. So congrats on the book, first of all. Wrote this with Mark Sisson, big name out there. That must have been really fun.
Oh, we've been writing together for now 16 years. So
Yeah.
dating back to 2009 when we released the Primal Blueprint. But Mark and I go way back as he was my coach when I was competing on the professional triathlon circuit. And so he dispensed his training philosophies and his kind of novel ideas about balancing stress and rest, which were not really in play back then. And he helped me reach my highest level as an athlete, mainly by helping me regulate my competitive intensity and not joining up with the prevailing notions of pushing yourself day after day after day to exhaustion because I was really fragile and it didn't work for me. And he said, okay, look, we're going to organize this differently. And I'm telling this story from way back when because a lot of this stuff informs our message strongly today, where we're still sitting here decades later watching the endurance community push themselves to exhaustion, injury, burnout, and failed weight loss efforts with a deeply flawed approach that is largely too stressful, exhausting, and injurious for the people who are doing it.
Mhm. Why do you think that that's the main narrative of I mean, it's really kind of overall in fitness culture, but it does seem like the endurance world is very much this more is better. There's that runner's high type thought, in the culture of getting in. Why do you think that is a little bit more prevalent in high endurance based world, marathon running, a triathlon running, even like just kind of high school cross country? It seems like that is the similar narrative.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane, and it's so tragic and heartbreaking to see these flawed themes prevail for so long. I'm thinking of our mutual friend, Dr. Craig Marker, and his epic quote that I think about all the time, where he was writing that breakthrough article, "Hit versus Hurt," and one of his lines was, "Your feelings don't care about what you're doing to your body. So when you crush a workout and you have that sense of euphoria and you're flooded with endorphin-like chemicals, feeling like you kick some ass and patting yourself on the back, you're also disassembling and deaminating the cellular proteins and destroying your system because you push yourself too hard and beyond the point that you could handle, and you require a lot of recovery time and downtime."
Mhm.
And so I think the high performing, especially the endurance community, attracts a certain personality, which is a type A, motivated, driven, goal oriented person that wants perhaps an outlet to all the other, high responsibility and high peak performance demands that they're putting themselves under in life, whether they're going to law school and they want to train for a marathon in the background, or whether they're busy raising a family and building a career and can't wait to bust out on Saturday morning to go for an 80-mile bike ride with all their other caffeinated training partners there. And it's great to have life balance, and it's great to get out in nature and push your body to peak performance efforts. But we're just advocating in the book and in real life to do it in a healthy, responsible manner that has an eye toward your longevity and your overall disease prevention and taking care of your body. I'm reminded of another quote from my good friend Simon Whitfield, who's one of the greatest triathletes of all time. He was the first Olympic gold medalist in triathlon in 2000. He also got a silver in 2008. So he had a very long career at the very top of international sport. And then I was interviewing him for my podcast. This is a few years after he'd retired from the circuit. And I said, Simon, so tell me about your routine today and your fitness regimen and your goals. And he said, Brad, today I'm coached by my 80-year-old self. And I'm like,
Oh, tell me about that. Yeah.
okay. So his 80-year-old self is watching over and it's either shaking his head going, "What the heck are you doing, dude?" Or it's going, "Hey, good, you're doing some mobility work in the morning now before you launch into, a sparring session in the ring with the younger opponent." And so I try to honor that and realize what are the repercussions and the ramifications of my fitness endeavors as related to my desire to live a healthy, balanced, energetic lifestyle for a long time. And the answer back when I was a professional triathlete is I was sacrificing so much general health and well-being for these marginal gains because I was trying to compete and move up one place on the ladder. And I would certainly do it again and again and again, just like most athletes, except for maybe those NFL guys that
Mhm.
can't walk now. I mean, you have to make those sacrifices when you're at the elite level. But we're talking to 99.9% of the people out there are
Right.
recreational and they're just trying to improve their life and serve as a role model for their kids and do things right. But unfortunately, I think it's the marketing hype and the cultural programming, building this ethos of struggle and suffer, and we get brainwashed into thinking, thanks to social media helping these days, that if you don't crush a workout at 4:30 a.m., well, you're three
Right.
levels down from a true peak performer that's able to crush it more often and earlier than you.
Yeah, it is. It's tough. It's attaching the process to a specific feeling that you're supposed to get. And anybody who has crushed a workout before, like it is a good feeling in the moment. You feel like you accomplished something, but if you're only chasing that feeling each time, then it starts to get down to this nasty spiral, and it's hard to get out of that spiral once you get into it.
Oh, I mean, you're so polite, Mike, because you didn't use the correct word, which is addiction.
Yeah.
And it's no
Mhm.
different. I mean, I had an addiction expert on my show, a food addiction expert, Dr. Joan Ifland, and she listed the nine questions that you may ask yourself to determine whether you're an addict or not. And if you put this to your typical extreme endurance enthusiast or CrossFit freak or even a gym freak, they're going to go 7 for 9 every time because it's like,
Yeah.
you don't feel whole or satisfied with your day until you get your workout in. Sometimes your happiness is fluctuating based on your performance level and all these things that kick in and seem like the norm and are often celebrated. And you discuss like going for that exercise high. That is, the true definition of the addict where they need that hit. And pretty soon you need it just to feel normal. So now it's like, if you don't get your workout, you're irritable, crabby, or if you put in a lower than expected performance, and all
Mhm.
those things, even when I was at the highest level, where you'd arguably give me an excuse to be really drawn into my performance and place great importance on it. When I got too caught up, that's when I struggled on the race course. And when I was able to chill out and get over myself and realize that, hey, I'm here to also enjoy my life and enjoy the process and compete with great competitive intensity and try my hardest in the race. But as soon as the race is over, I need to let things go and go on living my life with a smile and appreciating that, hey, I just got a trip to Australia to compete. I got my ass kicked, which sucks, but I'm still going to enjoy my day on the beach and be able to develop that type of mindset and that type of personality. That's when I was able to race at my very best anyway. So
Mhm.
calming down and toning down those dials enabled me to break through and reach my potential, surprisingly.
Yeah. So during your career, I mean, being a high level athlete is challenging enough for most people, but to be at the top of the top, which you were at in triathlon, you said there was sacrifices to your health that kind of come with the territory at that. Did you know that, like in your mind, that like this was part of the process, or were you more ignorant to it and that came down the line, once either, you were more seasoned in it, or did it come later in life?
Oh boy, that's a really interesting, rich question, and I have to answer yes like 3 times as you were talking. So, in many ways, I realized that this is some crazy shit that I'm doing, and I felt in many ways like an 80-year-old man when I was 30, and that
Mm.
meant like when I wake up in the morning after 10, 11, or 12 hours of sleep. Because I was so exhausted, I'd shuffle down the hall in with a gait pattern of a very elderly person who wasn't that fit, right? And every time I had free time, I was collapsed into a chair or a couch because that was the life that we lived. And then you'd turn up the dial and go. And I remember I took a 2 hour nap every afternoon and then I'd get up and have to go to swim practice or something. But I had that nap, and a lot of times I woke up and I felt like, an out of body experience where I was pushing myself so hard and pushing my brain so hard that it was kind of discombobulating, but it was part of the pattern. It was like being a soldier or something. Not in
Hmm.
the, I don't want to offend any soldiers, but I'm making that
Yeah.
comparison where this is for, competitive sports, but it really was to the extreme. And I think to the detriment deep down of one's mental health and well-being. However, I was happy. I enjoyed my life. I enjoyed the challenge and the competitiveness of it. But I did realize that physically, it was coming at a certain cost with not just the minor injuries. I didn't really have any serious injuries, but just the
Hmm.
fatigue and the hormonal burnout. But then, on the other hand, um, I felt like I was, a supremely fit human specimen until I realized how pathetic my overall fitness score was, whereby if it was a big rainy storm came and I had to lift 25-pound sandbags to help the elderly lady next door protect her garage from flooding, I'd wake up the next morning and I'd be all stiff in my lower back
Right.
and oh, my quads. However, I could go ride your butt off for 120 miles in the mountains, but I was
Hmm.
so narrowly focused and that narrow sliver of fitness that I pursued to the extreme. Hey, that's great. I could pat myself on the back for my A plus in cardiovascular endurance and triathlon performance. But
Hmm.
that's when I realized over the rest of my life and trying to get good to play soccer and basketball with little kids and then later become a sprinter and a high jumper that I needed to develop all these diverse fitness skills to actually call myself fit. And so today I'm almost 60 years old, a couple weeks. I'm going into a new age group for the Masters track and field. Those old hunched over wrinkly guys better watch out because I'm here to kick some butt. But I'm fitter in a more broad perspective than perhaps I was when I was racing at my peak at age 26 and, was a skinny freak that could go in a straight line really fast.
Yeah, it's a it's a weird juxtaposition when you're in such peak shape for one specific thing, yet anything else outside of that, and it's like you've aged yourself 40 years. It's gotta kind of be a weird mind fuck at that time, just to be in that zone. So when you left at 30 years old, first, is that around a normal age line when most kind of age out in that sport, or is it a little later or is it a little earlier? What's usually like
Um,
that kind of tail end, like where it's retirement time for triathletes?
Well, in the endurance sports, the science is very clear that you continue to build your aerobic competency even into your 30s and your late 30s. So if you look at the greatest performances of all time in triathlon, in marathon, these are guys that are 37, 38. Mark Allen, the
Mm.
greatest ever, had his fastest time of his 6 Hawaii Ironman victories at age 37. The guy won recently at 38 and beat the record for the oldest Hawaii Ironman world champion. Eliud Kipchoge, the greatest marathon runner of all time, two-time Olympic gold medalist, ran his fastest time at age 37. So you can build and build and build, unlike an explosive power, a sprinter type athlete, where it's often seen that those guys peak or those gals peak at a younger age. But
Hmm.
what's really cool today in major sport is that the sophistication of the training methods and the preparation and the recovery and all the stuff they do off the court or the field is allowing the careers to extend for much longer than in the old times when I think athletes beat their bodies up more. LeBron James is coming up on 22 years in the NBA. And he's as explosive as ever
Yeah.
because if you watch on YouTube LeBron James basketball workout, he is getting put through the paces by the top trainers and he's maintaining all those attributes that usually fade away unless you do something about it.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Is was it a tough like mindset or like identity shift leaving like a world that you were in for 9 years to now? I mean, all the work now that you focus on is on longevity of kind of peak performance, how to really deposit more rather than withdraw, from the bank. What was that process like for you of leaving one thing and now like, okay, now I'm going to focus on something else? Was that challenging? Or was it a pretty easy transition for you?
Well, it was quite challenging, emotionally, psychologically. I don't think it was the easiest time in my life when I saw that writing on the wall and realized in my case, I had to go get a freaking job, right? I didn't have a $78 million contract like a baseball pitcher who's out there twiddling his thumbs when he's 33 and done pitching. So
Mhm.
it was a nice shift to become a more broadened and more immersive into actual society person rather than living in this tunnel and training and eating and sleeping all day for a decade. So in many respects, it was a good personal growth experience, but the adjustment was, I think, made easier for me because the last 2 years of my career, I had come off my peak and I was starting to get my ass kicked left and right. And so I'd come home from these races and I'd try to rationalize and tell that positive story in my mind, but it was pretty clear that the magic was gone. And in comparison, when I was at my very best, I traveled around. I raced 44 times in 2 years, won like 25 times. It was just a blur of peak performance where I had worked so hard for so many years, my whole life really. And then everything started to fall in together and click. And it
Yeah.
was the most beautiful, glorious time where the races actually felt easier than they ever had before, even though I was going faster and winning the race and I'd cross the finish line like, hey, where is everybody else? Where
Mhm.
before I would struggle and suffer and try to go from seventh place to sixth place by sprinting in. Everything was clicking. But then what happens when an athlete hits a peak like that, oftentimes, is I became exhausted and took a long time to recover after that high. And
Mhm.
so everything was just not quite right at every workout and every race for the ensuing 2 years. And no athlete is ever known when you ask the question, "Are you at your peak right now?" Mostly the athlete says, "Well, no, I'm going to get better. I just broke the world record, but now I'm going to break
Right.
it by more next year." No one's going to say, "Yeah, this is as good as I'll ever be, and I'm about to go on a nice graceful slide down the hill to retirement." No
Yeah.
one can say that. But it was the writing on the wall that helped me process and realize, that it's time to move on now, thanks to the butt kicking that I got. It's kind of like getting laid off in your corporate position. Did you realize that after 30 years of service to the wonderful Fortune 500 company that your career was on the downside? Well, I realized when they kicked me out the door and escorted me with the security guard, it's very easy to realize that you've now made a transition in your career, you know?
Yeah. No, Mark Rifkin, master instructor with Strong First, has a great quote. He says, after a peak, you can either step off or you can fall off. And I was like,
Yeah.
and most it's sad because you think you're just going to keep going from that, and it's like just the process of getting off of that. It's a challenging thing physically as well as mentally as well. So, I
Yeah.
ask about that, shift because I think there still is, a lot of people listening are in the strength world, so they understand this. But most people, when we think about fitness, so many people go immediately to cardio and to running, where a lot of the work that you do specifically with Born to Walk is about walking, and that is even more powerful for fat reduction, for just overall cardiovascular. What do we need to know really about the benefits of walking on regular versus running on a regular?
Yeah, so you talk about that important fitness attribute of cardiovascular fitness, cardiovascular endurance. They're touting VO2 max now as this score. Your maximum amount of oxygen you can process is indicative of your endurance, your aerobic fitness. And it's important to realize that all types of exercise are technically cardio. A pickup basketball game is cardio. A strength training session is cardio. A CrossFit session is cardio. And of course, a steady state endurance effort going on the stairs or the bicycle or outside is a cardiovascular workout. But the steady state cardio that we come to revere as this huge important aspect of fitness is only a small sliver, like I said, and it's also developed with everything you're doing. Because as soon as you pull into the parking lot to the gym and get out of your car, your heart rate is now double resting rate, at least when you're walking to the door and punching in and getting your towel and going upstairs and doing your first warm up and then doing a set and then sitting on the bench and scrolling through your text messages while you're resting for 3 minutes. Your heart rate is still you're still working the cardiovascular system to help you recover from those brief bursts of intense exercise that happen when you're doing a strength training set or you're doing an assignment in a CrossFit class. So it's not this magical thing where you need to lock into a steady heart rate to develop your cardio. And in fact, there's a lot of negative aspects to pegging the heart rate at a steady state zone and doing that day after day, year after year, because it can overstrain the heart really easily. So that's the first point I want to make about cardio. And then the second point is if you want to develop aerobic endurance, which is your ability to process oxygen for a long time and continue on and burn fat as your primary fuel source, this capability is developed at a comfortable pace, not a strenuous pace. So, you know, that term on the poster at the gym or on the internet, you know, a fat burning workout. And what this conveys is a workout that is comfortably paced enough to emphasize and efficiently burn fatty acids as the prominent fuel source, and use mitochondria and have all the health benefits accordingly. So it's a low stress workout that is developing the aerobic system to function efficiently. And that indeed forms the baseline for all types of fitness endeavors. So you want to do a kettlebell class and you know, learn the new the Turkish get up and all those things that I could never learn. That indeed requires an aerobic endurance base. Otherwise, even if you're the strongest fool around, you're only going to be able to be good for a couple sets, and then you're going to be exhausted in general from doing high intensity performance because you don't have that foundation of endurance. So that's where cardio and aerobic exercise is so important for all athletes. Every professional sport, even a baseball player, you know, you need to be healthy and fit, and so that happens at the fat burning heart rates, and then everything else layers on top of that. But if you don't have a good aerobic foundation, you're going to poop out of any kind of workout, you name it. So what happens? Why does this have to do with walking and running? Is there is a very important distinction in exercise physiology, and we're going to call it fat max heart rate. And that is the heart rate at which you are burning the maximum number of fat calories per minute. And there's a minimal amount of glucose burning and anaerobic stimulation. If you were to speed up past fat max heart rate, of course, you're going to burn more total calories, right? You burn more calories the faster you go until you're
Right.
sprinting and burning the most. But you would start burning fewer fat calories per minute in favor of a good spike in the burning of glucose calories. And you can't discern any of this while you're exercising, but metabolically, hormonally, what's going on is your workout is turning into mild to significantly stressful. It's more and more emphasis on glucose burning, which turns you into kind of a sugar chomper in the diet. So you become a sugar burner as an athlete, and then you have a tendency to dysregulate appetite and satiety hormones due to the degree of difficulty of these prolonged workouts at slightly to significantly elevated heart rates. So the way most endurance athletes and fitness enthusiasts are screwing up is they're pushing themselves too hard outside of the fat burning zones and into the mild to significantly stressful zones. Thereby, they're not allowing their fat burning system and their aerobic conditioning to build and build and build without interruption from the fatigue, the breakdown, the soreness, and all the things that happen when you're immersed into a stressful training program. So this fat max heart rate is 180 minus age in beats per minute. That's your calculation. That's a very good estimate of your fat max. You can go put on a gas exchange mass in a performance laboratory and find out.
Right.
It's called your ventilatory threshold. But let's just say 180 minus age. That's from the work of Dr. Phil Maffetone, one of the great coaches of all time in aerobic endurance sports. So I'm almost 60, like I said. So my fat max is 120 beats per minute. So if I'm on a hike or a bicycle ride or whatever I'm doing for a prolonged amount of time, I need to keep at 120 or below in order to get a nourishing, energizing, refreshing, fat-burning workout versus a slightly stressful workout that's going to bring me over to the Ben and Jerry's pint later that night.
Okay. How subjective is those numbers have you seen based on fitness levels? I know some people, it seems, if they're at the beginning level getting that heart rate up might be a little bit easier versus if you're at a high fitness level or a high endurance. Is it still, do we see it's about the same numbers,
Yeah.
regardless of where
What's
you are as far as level?
Yeah, what's so awesome is this is a relative degree of difficulty based on percentage of maximum heart rate.
Hmm.
And we like to use the calculation rather than saying 73 to 77% of max heart rate, which it is. However, most people don't know their true maximum heart rate, right? Unless
Right.
you do another performance test. So it's percentage of max. And as you get closer to your max, you need to burn more sugar and less fat. That's the definition of fitness and how long you can last with your endurance, right? And so it's the same for everyone because the Olympic marathon champion is running a 6 minute mile for 18 miles at high
Right.
altitude at fat max heart rate. How does that relate or compare to you and I? For us, that's a medium or brisk walk. Brisk if we're super fit, and medium if we're normally fit. We're going to see that heart rate get up to that fat max through the level of capability that we have. And so as you build your fitness, you're able to go faster and faster at the same heart rate. So pretty soon, you might go from a medium walk to a brisk walk because you're really getting in shape and you're doing a lot of walking and you're hiking on the weekend and your body's getting better at burning fat. And maybe someday you'll turn that into a jog. And when I was a triathlete, I'd do a performance test at fat max and see what my pace per mile was. So I was
Hmm.
able to get my pace per mile down from 7 minutes a mile to 6 minutes a mile while still burning predominantly fat and feeling really comfortable. That
Hmm.
gave me a higher launching pad from which to launch all my peak performance efforts at much higher heart rates. But we have to respect this constraint, this limitation, and perform the vast majority of our cardiovascular exercise at or below fat max heart rate in order to build without interruption.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting. So how did the fascination and the work you've done with Paluva and the minimalist shoe work that you've done, come into play? Was this something that you were always thinking about before? Minimalist shoes, I mean, they've been around, for a while. Coming from the kettlebell world, we talked a lot about barefoot style training and minimalist shoes. And the strands that I got absolutely love, as I told you, they're my new squat shoes, and I love just walking around with them. How did you get into this world of footwear, and what kind of prompted you to want to get in and explore this venue?
Oh my gosh. I mean, my sidekick, Mark Sisson, has been obsessed with the minimalist shoes since the very first five-toe shoes appeared. I think around 2005, the Vibram
Mhm.
five-finger shoe came
Yep.
out, and we jumped all over those. They sponsored our endeavors and our supported our retreats, and we love the Vibram shoe. But the problem that happened with that craze back when in the early 2000s was people were kind of convinced that they should ditch their nice cushioned running shoes and put on these barefoot shoes and then take off down the road because it was metabolically superior. I mean, mechanically superior. And now you can run like the true human was born to run. And the best-selling book of that title, which ours is kind of a takeoff on that title, that also glamorized this human ability to run along barefoot and stride like the antelope. And so
Right.
there was a big kind of backlash against those minimalist shoes, and in fact, it was credited with launching the super shoe and the super cushion shoe movement with brands like Hoka that came out around 2010 and said, "Hey, have you been getting injured too much wearing those little toe shoes? How about this giant marshmallow pillow cushion shoe?" And it was definitely a response to people poorly adapted to throw on those barefoot style shoes and then go about their business and their workouts, especially running, which is, way too much to ask. So we patiently sat in the background, and Mark has been doing a lot of research and development with his son Kyle, actually 3 years worth of testing and prototyping, and they finally launched Paluva. And that's the new company that's just around since 2023. And we've had a wonderful response with these five-toe authentic barefoot shoes where there's a bit of cushion underneath so that when you're walking on a sidewalk or on a hard indoor surface or performing a challenging workout at the gym, you have a little bit of support so that it's not like you're jarring your bare feet that aren't adapted to something like a hike on a mildly dirt
Mhm.
rugged trail. And so it's kind of a compromise, and everyone's really given us great response that they feel like they're in a barefoot style lifestyle, but they have the protection and the functionality and also the fashion because they look cool and you can wear them out to dinner or wear them to the market. They don't look like workout
Yeah.
shoes like some of the early models people might have complained about. So it's been fun to kind of finally launch our own brand of what we feel is the perfect barefoot shoe. But the overall effort here is to encourage people to transition to a more barefoot and minimalist shoe inspired lifestyle. So we have an 88-page PDF that's for free. You can download at
Mhm.
palooza.com when you first visit there, and it'll help you get your feet stronger, transition carefully so you don't get injured or aches and pains as you move away from these big puffy shoes that you've worn your whole life into more minimalist models. And it's something that you have to be careful because most people have really weak, atrophied, and dysfunctional feet thanks to years and decades of wearing these, especially performance shoes or fashion shoes or leisure shoes.
Yeah, tell me a little more about that, about like the soft, cushy soles that they kind of started the running boom a lot, like for the recreational, market, right? Where everybody was coming out and there's these pillows on your feet. But what's happening to the mechanics of the body, which is, causing injuries in people that are coming in and then like transitioning to a barefoot style, why is it so important from the research you've done to kind of have this barefoot gait style as far as walking and just your kind of overall just work throughout the day?
Right. So quickly, you're correct. The running boom was started when Nike invented the first elevated cushion running shoe, the Nike Waffle Trainer in the mid 70s. Prior to that, the people who ran marathons were these extremely gifted and highly adapted genetic freaks who were able to put on these really rudimentary shoes with no padding. I did an Instagram post recently where I showed these. It was called the Onitsuka Tiger Marathon shoe, and it had a tiny little bit of padding and just some fabric sewn to this really thin rubber pad, and that's what you had to train in and run a marathon in. And so it was an entry barrier to this very, very difficult sport that you couldn't ask the average person to just lace
Mhm.
up and go plodding down the sidewalk, or their calves and their arches would start to ache and burn up after a mile or 2 miles or whatever. So then here comes this wonderful cushioned shoe where the average recreational enthusiast could now put them on and go out there and run 3 miles or 6 miles or 12 miles or 26.2 miles. And then the running community got more and more popular and more people were able to do it. Now, why are these people who are poorly adapted to be running long distances able to do it? Because the elevated cushion shoe absorbs that information. It compromises your proprioception so that you can't discern the penalty from this impact trauma that occurs even when you're jogging slowly. And so they feel comfortable because they're cutting off the sensation of your brain of how jarring it is to run, especially with poor form.
Mm.
And furthermore, the use of the shoes enable this poor form that would otherwise be impossible because it would be too immediately painful and jarring. So there's this great experiment that anyone can do right now. I can't believe I'm encouraging this. We can do our disclaimers at the end. But if you take off your shoes, go barefoot, and get onto a smooth stretch of hard surface, like a nice concrete sidewalk that's nice and clean, or an indoor gymnasium floor or hard marble floor if you have a long hallway, and take off and run several strides barefoot. And what happens immediately to anyone, no matter how out of shape, overweight, poorly adapted they are, you will immediately exhibit beautiful running form. You will run gracefully and lightly like a deer
Really?
down the sidewalk because after the first or second stride, the incredibly severe penalty of a jarring impact, the message is going to be sent through the incredible nerve density of your bare feet into your central nervous system, and your central nervous system will organize your kinetic chain efficiently to land over your midfoot with a balanced center of gravity, lightly like a deer or when your dog runs after the frisbee. Now, I'm not saying you're going to go run 5 miles
Mhm.
with bare feet down the sidewalk, because pretty soon you're going to be in deep trouble. And that's kind of what happened with the first launch of the barefoot shoes, is people thought they were immune from the
Right.
laws of,
Going
atrophy
primal right
and all
away.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm going for it all the way. And I'm going to fast all day
Yep.
and then go keto and then do another kettlebell
And
workout
then
at
kill
night.
a deer and
Okay.
just eat it raw. Yeah, all that
Yeah, yeah,
stuff.
all that stuff, all that over the deep end.
Mhm.
So once that experiment's done, now we realize that the use of these shoes enable poor form. They don't cause poor form. There's not an innate object on a shelf that's going to cause poor form. A lot of people say that. But what happens is when you have dysfunctional glutes, tight hamstrings, weak core muscles, and you try to become a runner, and all that's developed from sitting around all day, right? And not being a fabulous fit person. You're working and you have a busy life, and then you put on your shoes and you run down the road. You develop this jarring, breaking, heel striking, overstriding pattern that Harvard research believes is exhibited by 80 to 95% of all recreational runners. We really should call them shufflers rather than even joggers. And so the key distinguishing feature is this kind of overstride, where the tibia, when you land over your midfoot over a balance center of gravity, your tibia is almost vertical to the ground.
Mhm.
But when you have the overstriding pattern, because your glutes aren't firing well, because your hamstrings are too tight, and because of all that dysfunction in the musculoskeletal system, you're landing with a braking pattern where the tibia is forming an acute angle to the ground. And that is where you get the tremendous jarring that is inappropriately dispersed throughout the lower extremities without your immediate knowledge, because of the cushioned shoe blocking the sensation of how
Mhm.
jarring that is. Now, I told you about the barefoot experiment. If you take off barefoot down the sidewalk and try to run with a heel striking braking pattern, you're not going to make it one stride. It's
Right.
sort of like asking, jump off your final stair step in your home and land on your heels. You can't even, your brain won't even let you, because
Right.
you know
Yeah.
it's going to be too painful. If you jump up in the air 1 inch and land on your heel, everyone do it right now. Pause the podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't want to do it. And what happens is your brain maintains balance and fires that kinetic chain so gracefully, because you allow yourself to be who you can be. So I kind of answered your question of like, why is it so important to get back to barefoot? Because that's how we're supposed to exhibit excellent posture and stride mechanics for walking, running, and of course things that you mentioned like swinging the kettlebell or doing the
Mhm.
squat or doing whatever.
Yeah, that's really interesting distinction, Brad, about, I've heard that a lot, and I've thought that too, of like the cushion shoe, it puts you in a bad form or technique, which is causing injuries down the line. As you said, no, it's not doing that, but it's shutting off the sensor of your brain telling you like when you're going too hard, or like when you need to like pause, or like, or if you're in like an off position. So it shuts that down. So it probably allows you to do more volume than you've earned at that time. And that's why chronic injuries are popping up, probably in the knees, in the hips, the ankles, so on and so forth. Is that about right?
Oh, for sure. And the chronic injuries, the overuse injuries, the rate of injury is so stunning and
Mhm.
embarrassing that it's a complete, a blanket condemnation of the endurance running scene. The research is all over the world. There's different studies, but Yale University School of Medicine contends that 50% of regular runners are injured every year, and
Mhm.
that 25% of regular runners are injured at any given time. 25% of the crowd is sidelined due to overuse injury. And it's
Mhm.
strongly driven by the use of these shoes, allowing poorly adapted people to run who really shouldn't be running. And so we say, look, if you want to run, please learn to run with correct form, which is the midfoot landing over a balanced center of gravity. Oh, how do you do that? Well, guess what? You're going to need some ankle mobility. You're going to need some knee resiliency, and the medialis muscles and the glutes are all going to have to fire correctly to allow you to land correctly. So maybe the average person can only run for a quarter of a mile before some fatigue kicks in and some functionality problems cause them back to the shuffle. So it's
Mhm.
okay to run and then stop and walk and then run for 20 seconds and then stop and walk and have a proper workout session where it's not too strenuous because you keep walking to recover and you're teaching your body to run correctly without all that impact trauma that comes from shuffling at a steady state down the road or trail with that breaking stride pattern. And so now this calls into question, like I said, everything's cardio, and then also why in the heck do we need to maintain a steady pace? Who said that that's a way to become fit or that that's important in any way? The only reason to maintain a steady pace in training is, oh, you're preparing for a race and you want to excel in the race. So you want to learn what it's like to run 9-minute miles for 6 miles. And those are so few people that should even be concerned with their speed and their pace in the race. It's more about building full body functional fitness. And boy, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities where you don't have to adhere to some steady pace and suffer through a workout that gets more and more difficult as it goes on because your body's getting tired. And what's happening when that happens? Your heart rate's going up. It's out of the fat burning zone. You're losing the metabolic benefits. And now you're going to get into the zone where you become exhausted, depleted, you spike appetite, you feel lazy and tired the rest of the day, and you go for the ice cream at night.
Right. So if someone does want to maybe just run recreationally, they enjoy it, it's kind of like a good spot. Like I know during the summertime, just getting out sometimes and going for a run is just an enjoyable thing. Is it a good goal to work up to running in a minimalist base shoe, or is it more like use more of like a minimal shoe for walking? That should be the main thing, and then using something else for maybe a couple of times a week, while you're going through your runs. Kind of what's the protocol, do you think,
Yeah.
to best work with your performance there?
Well, it's a long, gradual process where you're going to set this intention and this goal to become more barefoot adapted overall in life. And the centerpiece, of course, is walking more extensively every day, barefoot, spending as much time barefoot as you can in the house and in other safe areas like whatever the beach or a turf field, and then wearing the most minimalist shoe possible, doing the most things possible in that minimalist shoe. Now, when it comes to endurance running, the first lecture we've already been through is like, do you really think that you need to run, and you really think that's good for your health and your overall? And for most people, they can't answer correctly because it's too strenuous.
Hmm.
Now, if you're super fit and you got in the semifinals of the CrossFit Games and you like to once in a while go out there and run 6 miles, you're probably well adapted to do so without ill effects.
Hmm.
Same with the true genetically gifted endurance people on the planet. They're 1 in 50 specimens, and I'm saying this not out of the blue, but 2% of all marathoners in the world break 3 hours. If you can break 3 hours in a marathon, that is quite impressive performance. It's a 6:51 pace per mile for 26 miles. Those people are real runners, and they are, if you want to line them up, they're lean, they're very light on their feet. They have some athleticism. They're not just shuffling along. They have an extreme devotion to training. And so they've built up the capability where running actually does feel good and refreshing and energizing for them. And it's not the slog and the plodding that most of the people in the pack are suffering from. So if you insist upon running, it's probably wise to keep going with the same shoe that you've been using so you don't
Hmm.
get an injury from abrupt transition. But perhaps think about grabbing a pair that's sort of an in-between model. So we have the super shoes. Hoka is one of the leading brands there. They all make these giant padded shoes now.
Right.
And then I've used a model called the Nike Free for a long time with the really flexible sole. And so I'll do my sprint workouts wearing the Nike Free so I can get more padding and less tendon stress because I'm an old man and I'm still trying to sprint. And then I'll do my whatever, 10 minutes of sprinting in those, and then I'll put on the paluvas for the rest of the day, including the drills that I show on the website. And so you can do almost everything in paluvas, and then when it's time to go pick up basketball against the little kids, of course I'm going to put on a basketball shoe. Or when I high jump, I wear a high jump spike that has a steel plate and spikes in the heel, right? I'm not going to jump in a barefoot shoe because the event is so crazy. I need all the protection I can get.
Yeah. No, I'm really always just fascinated by the foot. In FMS, the ankle they say is really like the eighth test of the seven test process of it because the foot is just so powerful for strength, for cardiovascular, just overall, like everything that it's our connection to the earth.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize this until personally I had a locked up ankle and a foot issues, which was leading to sciatica. And at like a late 20s guy with sciatic issues, I was like, what the heck is going on? Like you talk about like fit, strong, and feeling like I'm
Yeah.
60 years old, like walking around like with a hunch from there. So anything that you can do to benefit your foot, I think is so powerful. That's why I love what you guys are doing with Palooza.
Every feat you try to complete starts with the feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it launches, it's the base for almost all kinetic chain activity in the body, right? Even throwing a ball, you're planting that foot, you're dorsiflexing the toe that you're planting off of, and we kind of don't we fail to understand that when we encase them in shoes. And so it's kind of shoes are the necessary evil, right? In order to play in the
Mhm.
NFL, you got to wear the cleats or in the NBA, but we want to make this devoted effort to spend more time in a barefoot style experience. And I was describing even standing posture, you have to be barefoot in order to exhibit correct posture
Yeah.
because the body's skeleton is designed to load over the incredibly dense and cross reinforced calcaneus bone. The heel bone is designed to hold your body weight and stack your skeleton so that your hips, your spine, your shoulders, and your head are loading over the heel bone. Now, as soon as you put on any shoe virtually, except for the zero drop shoes that are purposefully, most shoes have the heel is higher off the ground than the midfoot or the toe. So when you put on a shoe, all of a sudden your body weight is
Mhm.
tilted so that you're loading over the balls of your feet. That's where we get the modern dude posture of the hunched shoulders
Mhm.
and the compressed cervical spine and all these things that are indicative of loading the body weight improperly, even when standing around. We're causing damage in the shoe, not to mention when we start walking and especially when we start running with that braking pattern.
Yeah. So, Brad Kearns, Brad, I'm so grateful for you, man. I really appreciate you coming on today. I learned so much from you and the work that you're doing with Paluva, now with the book. It was really great connecting today. I appreciate it.
Thanks. That was a fun conversation. We flew through the whole thing. And
Mhm.
if people want to learn more about the book, the website is borntowalkbook.com. And you
Perfect.
can connect with me at bradkearns.com or the BRAD podcast and keep doing what you're doing. It's great, great process we're on here. We're learning every day and doing our best.
I love it. Great. So we'll get all those in the show notes. So listeners, go check out everything that Brad's doing. Brad, thank you again so much. Appreciate it. Listeners, thank you. I'll catch you guys in the next one. All right. Peace.